think what's really difficult as a leader is you are responsible for so much, but in the end, you were responsible for so little. Like, I could not control that this was happening. And yet now I had so much responsibility for what happened next.
Welcome to 99 Humans. My name is Jeff LaCosta, curious coach and Wall Street Journal best-selling author, striving to understand how little things generate big impact.
And I'm Nadia Carta, tech executive and lifestyle coach with a mission to transform lives and corporations by kindling hearts to generate a zeal for life.
Each week, we investigate stories about the human side of leadership to re-energize your spirit and help you become a stronger leader.
Because the reality is that leadership is messy, goofy, challenging, but always human.
Thanks for spending time with us today. Let's dive in.
Today we welcome Alana Karen, a 20-year Googler and author of The Adventures of Women in Tech, How We Got Here and Why We Stay. Her book delves into the challenges women face in this industry and the skills needed to succeed. As a woman in tech, I was drawn to Alana's story, and she was kind enough to join us to share a very challenging personal moment that became a huge leadership lesson. Alana was one of the first leaders we spoke with, and it's a privilege to share her story with you. Here's Alana.
So, look, when Jeff came up with this idea, which is fantastic, the whole concept is to find these humans that, on top of being leaders, are just incredible souls that are happy to be vulnerable and share not only the beauty of leadership, but also what are the challenges associated with it. And it can be across any category, right? It can be across hiring, firing, mentoring, coaching, managing low performers, managing high performer. We're truly listening the most beautiful and engaging stories, managing up, managing down. And this is like a space for you to share any of the stories that come to your mind based on your career. 20 years at Google, I think, is extremely remarkable. And you've been doing so many speeches in your book and all that. So it's just a pleasure to have the honor of being able to have you with us.
Yeah.
And the space is all yours.
Stories. When I was reading what your summary was, it had sounded a little bit like you were maybe looking for one story to anchor to, and maybe you want that, maybe not. But I was trying then to think of like a meaty story, not just a like someone came to me, it was hard, we worked together, the end kind of thing. And the lots of hard leadership stories over the years, but I think one of the hardest was when I was on Google Fiber, and what ended up happening was that we'd, over the years, built out a rather large team to support the growth and scale of a, a grandiose plan for Google Fiber, which then got changed. And the decision was, because that plan got changed, to have the vast majority of the people who were working on fiber move on. And because this was within Google, they gave people time to find new jobs. But it was still uncertain, and it was emotionally very hard for people to go through this thing that they thought was building up towards something amazing, and now it was all pivoting. And at the same time, they were keeping the product going. So there was a much smaller set of people who were now going to carry the product forward, and they were grappling with their own issues as well. So the reason I really thought about it was because I took essentially a year of my life to help that land. The initial shifts started to happen in 2016, where we saw budgets starting to get limited as the plan got thought about. And we actually did an initial round of cutting staff in that fall. But when I got back from winter break, the first thing my manager, a VP at the time, told me was, and he had to call me special to tell me, was that we were going to do a further deeper cut. So we'd already been through this initial cut, already had to help the team land and deal with that, go through all of that emotional change management. And I was exhausted from that. And then I get back from winter break and it's going to happen again. And so at the time, I really personally thought I might be done. And I mean done, like done with Google, like just physically done. Like I was curled after my VP told me this, I was curled up in a ball on the couch because I'd already been through this. And I think what's really difficult as a leader is you are responsible for so much, but in the end, you were responsible for so little. Like I could not control that this was happening. And yet now I had so much responsibility for what happened next. And that weight is intense. And it had already been weighing on me because we'd gone through this first round of cuts. And I'd put a lot, it felt like I'd put a lot of my integrity on the line getting the team through that first round of cuts, right? Yes, I know this is really hard, but this is how we're going to go forward. And this is what we'll focus on next year. And then to have it happen again was just a real like stab to the heart. I ended up just giving myself a little space that week and the week after, but ultimately came back to my leadership and said, you can put me on the list. I'm going to move on. But here's my proposal for how you give me everyone who's going to be impacted by this, and I will help them find roles. Because I was really trying to look for this way like, what is the most actionable, helpful thing I can do in
Mm.
this moment as a leader? And on one hand, I was pretty sure that I wasn't going to be able to, with a straight face, get my team through another round of these cuts. Like I'd already put so much integrity on the line for the first one. How was I going to do it a second, going so deep?
Hmm.
So I already knew that wasn't going to be where I was going to be most helpful and actionable. But what I knew was I knew Google really well, and I knew how to navigate our internal hiring system. And I knew how to support people through doing that. And so ultimately, it was a little bit of one of those make lemonade out of lemons moments. I was like, this is super shitty. And there's nothing I can do about how shitty it is, but I can make it less shitty for someone else. And I can help people through this system that many wouldn't understand because many were new to Google, but I did. So I spent the year doing that. And it was one of the most rewarding experiences of my life. I think what you'll find with a lot of leaders who tell you these stories is that often the worst experiences lead to some of the most rewarding experiences as a leader because it gives you the opportunity to help people in a really difficult time, which can be so much more impactful than just having glorious success on some product. Also learned a ton from it because I was really spending much more of my time, 70%, 80% of my time focusing on people's emotions and how they get through change and how do they deal with something that really jolted them out of a plan that they thought they had for their life that they were really happy with and now figure out where to go and have new momentum. And everybody's different, which I know we always say, but it was really interesting to see how that played out, where I would have someone who came to me within a week of the announcement and have a new life plan. And I'd have other people 6 months from that still struggling. And that is often what I'm spending my day job on, but squeezed amongst a lot of other things. And so this was a year where I really spent the majority of time helping people through this change and helping them as well as possible get going again. And we had enormous success the way you want to measure success, right? We were able to place people. I still have people come back to me and say that was amazing experience. What can we learn from it? So as a sort of set of best practices, it became something that Google used again and again. A lot of the programs we developed to help people, the additional support continue to be modeled when we have to do things like this again, even though we try to avoid doing it, of course. By all the metrics, I should feel really good about it. And I do. But I will add another component of it, which is that it came at an enormous personal cost. I giggle as I say a very serious, awful thing,
Mm.
but because I've dealt with that now. But at the time, I don't think I realized how exhausted I was already and how much of an emotional burden I would take on by doing this with hundreds of people for the year. And I've never mentioned the scale of this, but when we impacted people that year, we were impacting about 800 people. And I didn't end up having to work with each and every one. Some of them got lifted and shifted to other teams. Some of them never needed my help. But in the end, I worked closely with hundreds of them. And people all along the way were like, this is really hard, Alana. Are you sure you want to do it? Then during it, we're like, are you okay, Alana? And I've dealt with enormously stressful things all through my career. And I thought I was fine. And then by about September of that year, I was having vision issues where I was seeing like floaters and things that weren't there. And my left foot had gone numb.
Oh.
And it's one of those times where you think, oh, like, no, maybe I really did hurt myself. Like maybe I put too much of myself on the line for this company. Where is the boundary between me and it? Now, initially, I thought maybe I had major health issues because there could be some, but I got checked out for all of those. What it really boiled down to was stress and anxiety,
Yeah, I believe it.
and how more and more we're seeing the physical ties between those things, and which because a lot of people think of them as feeling, but the physical impacts on the body. And I went to a physical therapist for my foot, which really helped. And even he was talking about, I don't think it's all in your head. There are these ties. We're seeing more and more ties between your physical and your mental state. And so then I had to work through that, which I did. And I'm, again, all the healthier for having experienced this. But I think that we look at leadership as the pinnacle of what we can do and as success. And people want to emulate leaders and they want to be those leaders. And we just can write it off as like they've reached the top. And it is really interesting when you're in the seat, how stressful it is, how much it feels at the service of others and not yourself, and where you find that balance. End of my spiel.
Look, it was so fabulous that it got me thinking on so many elements. I think we underestimate our body response to stress. And I think there should be more education at Google on leaders about that. So my question to you is how did you upskill yourself on, like, when you saw that you had a physical reaction and then it was stress, like what happened in you with this new awareness in saying, okay, like what do we do now as a leader? How did you change then your style eventually? How did you came back to work and saying, hey, I gotta still deliver, but I gotta pace myself?
Yeah. I'll have to see if there's an external video on it, but I've done a whole talk on it. And I have done it internal for the program managers, so I should be able to send you the link. So it's recorded and you can see my whole spiel. But because I took longer to walk through everything, I'll give you the short spiel on it, which is that I was going through this journey anyway to figure out if it was a medical issue or whatnot. First of all, I systemically went through all the things you would normally do. You go to your doctor, then your doctor refers you to other doctors. You see all of those doctors. You rule out neurological issues. You rule out this, you rule out that. And maybe along the way, you do other things that are your go-tos, your chiropractor, your massage, your this, your that. And I I yes, I was seeing a therapist at the time. So there's therapy involved as well. I think this is all lining up. There may have been a couple different rounds of therapy as well, so I'm not going to remember all the details. Also focus on the mental state and working through the mental state. And ultimately, I landed on some of the go-tos that everyone will talk to you about, but we rarely implement consistently for ourselves. And they are sleep, diet, exercise, mental health, and there's a fifth. Sleep, diet, exercise, mental health. I must not like it very much.
Community often is
Community is one. I didn't hammer on it as much. Relationships is one,
Yeah.
usually. They have to be healthy relationships if you're going to rely on relationships. Maybe I have to pull back up my deck. Anyway, as I talk about it, maybe I'll remember it. And sleep. So everyone's going to have different things that are the most important to them. Over time, as I explored and tested things out, used myself as my own guinea pig, but also reflected. When have I felt my best? When have I felt my worst? What often triggers health issues, chronic health issues I've had over the years, um, where I get migraines, where I get stomach pains, right? What are these things? Because it had struck me that potentially all of this was a new manifestation of that same issue, right? It's always stress, but it shows up physically different ways. And over the years, I had already learned more how to manage my stomach issues through diet mainly, and migraines through usually caffeine, alcohol, and not more of it, less of it, just to be clear.
Got that. But yeah.
Yeah. And now here was another way that was showing up, that my body was manifesting this stress and that I wasn't controlling it. So I had to think about the different ways and ultimately landed on I need 8 hours of sleep. I need it every single night. And by the way, studies show the average adult should have 7 to 9 hours of sleep, and that I think maybe only a third of us get what we should be getting. So it's more and more showing up in like, how do we restore? How does your brain reset and restore? And it does this through sleep. And if you're not getting enough sleep, it's building and building. And your migraines are swelling in the brain, basically. Eye issues, swelling in the brain. Like when I went to the ophthalmologist, he said, I don't remember the exact numbers, but say it's like maybe 30% of adults come in a week with unexplained visual phenomena. 90 some percent of them have migraines too. So there's just like really basic stuff that we're not doing because we've come up with these mantras. You'll sleep when you're dead, you'll seize the day, like all of this type of stuff. And then it's really not sustaining us, it's not serving us. And we might get away with it when we're younger and we can recover fast with less sleep and recover faster from the terrible things we do to our body with caffeine and alcohol and all of these types of things. But as you get older, that's not going to happen. And you're going to have to find out different ways. So for me, definitely 8 hours of sleep. I got way more into yoga, which as a youngin, I couldn't stand. It was too calm and too peaceful. But now I really, as a mental break. And there's lots of studies about how yoga is just like magical between the meditation elements and the exercise elements. Making sure I get outside, get my vitamin D was another huge component for me. Continuing to watch the diet factor was also big, but not so big because I was also already mostly controlling it. But it did lead me to just make sure that I was really, when you get stressed, often fries sound really good. So
Yeah.
just making sure that I was really not becoming a health nut because I can't, honestly, but that I was being intentional each week, right? Yes, I can have the fries, but when am I going to have the kale? So, yeah, it was a lot of that, honestly. And nothing too hocus pocusy. Not everyone likes the yoga and the meditation stuff for sure. I wasn't like burning herbs or anything. Like it was just really taking time to focus on myself. And what I try to compare it to is that we used to just have more space for silence, right? There weren't constant devices. Many people went to church, which they no longer do. There were things where we built in reflection, meditation, silence, recovery. There weren't lights at night. So you went to bed and you recovered. And it wasn't that there wasn't stress back then, there was a ton more stress and survival stress, but much more critical stress about life survival. But there were built in ways to recover that we are maybe not availing ourselves of today. Mind you, lifespans were shorter too.
Yeah.
So we're also stretching out all of these experiences over way more years. And so it's not necessarily that we were more healthy or successful back then. We're just testing the boundaries of the human life form at this point in real time.
So much of your incredible story really resonates with me, and I want to go back for a minute to one key moment that I think you said. It's amazing how much responsibility leaders have and how little responsibility leaders have. And that really resonates with me. And everything that you went through to some degree was from some decision outside of your control. And I'm curious about how transparent you decided to be, because this is a decision that leaders have to make when things outside their control happen. And I'm curious, especially putting yourself directly into their shoes in the way that you did, where did your decision land and how did that go on how transparent you were about the amount of control you had here?
I, over time, ended up being pretty transparent. When stuff started to get tough, when it was clear budgets were getting limited, when there's always like conversations you're privy to where you're hearing all the different options, maybe that people are thinking about. I am not transparent during that time period. I don't like to freak people out. I don't like to come to them with unformed
Opinions.
suspicions. And Google will throw out 7,000 ideas. You have no idea at any given time what's actually going to land. So if you make everyone privy to all of that sausage making, you're just going to freak people out, honestly. And I had no idea at any given time where things were going to be. Now, some people will fill any silence with their own rumor mill, etc. So I did do some messaging to try to hold down the fort and keep people patient and control too much spiraling out of control. But mostly I tried to work with leadership. If you're going to do stuff, let's do stuff, because people make up stuff.
Yeah.
When we had to do our first round of cuts, that was 17 people from my team of about 120. And at that point, the day after it got announced, I had an all hands where everyone was invited from that 120. And my main message was, this is super, super hard, that this is where what the company has decided, but we can move forward and recover. And I, on purpose, talked about how difficult it was for me and how personally I felt about this and how proud I was of what we'd built and how much it hurt that we weren't going to get to do it together the same way we'd planned. And I cried. I cried. which everyone's like, leaders shouldn't cry. I cried. And I got so much kudos for it. So I think all of that don't cry thing is a little bit overblown because what people needed to see at that moment was that I was human and it hurt and find me relatable. And a lot of the leadership had gotten up, made it sound like it was totally okay and it would all work out, and no one was buying it. And so seeing real human emotion at that point really helped. And so they saw the cost in real time. It was also pretty clear that I voted myself off the island come February. So not so much, and I was clear and I messaged this to the team because I didn't believe that the fiber product could continue, but because it was very clear that's where I wasn't needed anymore. And personally, I felt much more like I needed to go help this cohort. I will say it had a win-win factor in the end. People had a lot of respect for me for making that call and maybe not trying to stand up for what they didn't believe. Fiber was it has and is still existing and it has recovered, but it took a while to do that. And so I think that people understood, even though they loved working with me and I felt very touched by the things people said, they understood why I had done that. So I think they ended up having a lot of respect for why I made the decision and how I did it and what I did with the people. But I do think it sent two pretty clear messages. Like once when I wept in front of everyone, and once when I was like, yeah, I can't even stay and lead you through it. So I did feel fairly like I'd been fairly transparent.
Yeah.
What I never did though was I never badmouthed leadership across the board. I never leaked info before it was available. I never made it sound like the product couldn't succeed because I still believed it could. I think that there are things that sometimes people do emotionally in those time periods that I really tried not to do. I did have a private cohort that I let all that stuff out on if I for whatever emotions I had, but I did not use my team.
Alana, now we're at time and we're about to close this Friday. So as we close, could we ask you, what is the one advice that you would like to leave to the reader as a bottom line of your story?
Who you are as a leader is a reflection of how you lead yourself.
Thank you for that.
Incredible story. Thank you. Thank you.
So powerful.
I know it's that's I was like, it's got to be that
That's
one. If I'm
meaty, said
hearing.
meaty. That qualify.
Thank you so much. This was invaluable.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.
It's great to
Thank you
meet
so
you.
much. Have a nice afternoon. Bye.